Here we are.
Brian Snoddy is going to be on the podcast today. His name probably doesn't ring a bell to anybody. He's an amazing researcher. His knowledge of JFK, man, to me, it's second to none. He has a couple of YouTube specials. One is called The Cast of Characters, where he kind of lays out all of the people involved in the JFK assassination plots and theories. And the other is called The Killers, where he kind of goes into who could possibly have been the crews, the gunmen. So I'll link those in the show description if you guys have any interest. But he lays it out audibly, and we kind of get sidetracked with some other conspiracies and some talk, as we often do. But this was a pretty cool conversation, Tom.
Definitely. Another great episode for the beginning of this show. JFK is a good topic for people to discuss with their more normie friends and try and wake up to the spider web, if you will, of conspiracy to go down. He laid it out pretty clear and pointed out some things that even the most skeptical person would scratch their head at.
Yeah, spider web indeed. One thing that we talked about a little bit repeatedly in the episode, and I'll touch on it, I guess, a little bit before we get into the what's the way that you put that? The beef, the meat of the matter? I don't know.
Tofu.
The tofu of the matter. This is really one of the more digestible and easier, quote-unquote, conspiracies to get into because, you know, they blew his brains out, whether you think the Zapruder film is real, whether they doctored the photos or not. One thing that is irrefutable is that he got his head blown off. And it's pretty easy for people to get into that one. But it's enough of us, I guess. Enjoy the conversation we had with Brian Snoddy. I want to welcome Brian Snoddy to the show. I first came across this gentleman, was it 2016, I think, Brian? You had a cast of characters video on the whole JFK conspiracy. I have never heard anybody lay out all of the cast of characters and kind of connect everything like you did. This is one of my favorite topics, conspiracy topics to talk about, so there's no other person I could think of to talk about it than you. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
So, Brian.
Yes.
I'm sure everybody listening probably knows a little bit, at least, about, the JFK assassination, right? Before you lay everything out, you get into it, what do you think most likely happened?
Well, I think that President Kennedy wasn't doing what the powers that be wanted him to do, so they took him out. That's what I believe. That's
pretty much what I wanted to ask and get into as well, because most of us are from the point of view that, all the presidents are part of the club. They're selected. They're there to play their role. And it does seem like maybe he was stepping out of line a little bit. So definitely interested to get into this.
Yeah, I think he was stepping out of line a lot of it because he pissed powerful people off.
Well, if you don't mind, could you lay it out? This isn't a video podcast yet, and that obviously adds a lot to your presentation. But do you think you could do it with words alone?
Yeah, I think so. Let's just look at some of the people he pissed off, and maybe there's more out there. Well, he definitely pissed off the CIA, right? He fired Allen Dulles, head of CIA, after the Bay of Pigs catastrophe, which the CIA cooked up and effed up. And then they blamed Kennedy because Kennedy wouldn't call in some troops to back up that invasion, right? He didn't want a war with Cuba. And so they blamed him for it, said he was soft on communism. He pissed off the mob. His father, Joseph P. Kennedy, made a backdoor deal with mafia boss Sam Momo Giancana out of Chicago to get Kennedy in the White House. Of course, when Kennedy got in there, the first thing he did was start going after the mob with his brother Bobby, which really made all these mobsters angry. And I believe without mob help, Kennedy would have lost that election. J. Edgar Hoover hated both the Kennedys. J. Edgar Hoover is also best friends and next-door neighbor with soon-to-be President Johnson, Lyndon Johnson. Kennedy pissed off the Texas oil men. They were using a tax loophole, and Kennedy put a stop to it, and they lost their minds. He had pissed off U.S. Steel. They were doing some weird stuff, and he put a stop to that. He pissed off the state of Israel, and very few people want to bring that up. That is a smoking hand grenade that people don't want to touch. But he pissed off Israel pretty bad. He wouldn't sell them nuclear weapons. He wanted all Israeli lobbyists in the United States to be labeled as foreign agents, not lobbyists. The American people can lobby their government. Foreigners, I tend to see that as bribery myself, actually. There was other people he made angry, but those are the big ones. Those are the ones that had the power to knock his lights out, and some of them had the power to cover it up.
Well, is it also true he was opposed to the Federal Reserve and was trying to maybe rehash that whole thing or even do away with it to begin with?
Yeah, there's some people out there that will say that, but there's people out there also who will say that, well, yeah, he printed those banknotes, backed by silver, we the people owned, instead of going to the Federal Reserve, and that's one of the reasons the big bankers wanted him taken out. Some people say, well, it didn't make any difference because it wasn't enough money, and they'll say how it didn't really affect the Federal Reserve. There's people that make an argument. I don't know. And also, we have to remember, Kennedy wanted to pull us out of Vietnam. So he pissed off the military-industrial complex, which is an extremely powerful thing in this country. The big banks kind of run that kind of stuff, so technically, I guess he did piss off the big bankers.
It'd be easier to list everybody that he didn't piss off, right?
I know. That would probably be a shorter list.
One of the things that I had no idea of until I watched your presentation, what a scumbag Lyndon Johnson was. Could you lay that all out for everybody?
Yes, he's a piece of degenerate. I mean, Lyndon Johnson, interesting, was born into poverty. I think there were 5 or 6 kids in his family. He was the oldest, or he was in there somewhere. When he grew up, he was a sadistic psychopath. He tied a stick of dynamite to a dog's head and blew him up. He beat a mule to death in the middle of a street with an axe handle right in front of a bunch of people. When he was in high school, him and his buddies had a car, and they would drive around and put live rattlesnakes in the trunk. And they'd pull up to a gas station that had blacks that were kind of, pumping gas and stuff. And they'd say, yeah, there's a noise in the back of the trunk. They'd open it up and rattlesnakes would jump out and stuff. He used to walk around Air Force One naked. He used to pull his dick out in front of people. He used to call his dick Jumbo because apparently he had a big, huge one. He banged every woman he could get his hands on. He was constantly drunk. There's a famous picture of Kennedy, and then there's a weird picture of Lyndon kind of staring at him from the corner of his eye. By the way, Lyndon Johnson was so drunk he doesn't remember taking that picture. And then basically when he resigned from the presidency, he retired to his ranch. He was worth $25 million at that time now, despite only having a government job. In 4 years, he smoked and drank himself to death. He was seeing a psychiatrist the entire time. He stopped cutting his hair. There's a famous picture of him with really long hair. It looks like he's getting ready to go to a Dead concert. That's the guy who was sitting in the White House for 6 years.
And that's the short version because he
That's
had...
the short version.
Yeah, because he had to say it killing his own sister, right? I mean, yeah.
Now, I believe he had his sister killed. I have no hard evidence other than that his hitman, Malcolm Wallace, who we know killed people for Johnson, and I believe Wallace killed his sister with carbon monoxide. That's what I believe.
Wow. For the things that we can prove, I wouldn't put anything past him. He was obviously a complete lunatic.
Let's not overlook how a guy like this would be angrily jealous at Kennedy for banging Marilyn Monroe, among a bunch of other people, probably.
I agree. And let's not forget he was banging Angie Dickinson, too. She used to be pretty hot. He used to say that, Kennedy had nothing on him because he was banging way more chicks than Kennedy was.
Can you imagine if those guys lived today or social media existed back then?
Trump with Kim Kardashian.
They make Donald Trump look like a choir boy,
That's what's crazy. People don't even realize the stuff that was going on back then. It was a completely different world. Why do you think they keep pushing back the information? The Kennedy files were supposed to be released by Trump, and then he pushed them back. Why do you think they keep doing that?
Well, obviously, because there's so much evidence in there to say, A, that Oswald didn't do it, and that our government has been lying to us for 60 years now, and that, B, there's a whole bunch of dirt on a lot of people, and that dirt doesn't want to come out, and that's what I think is going on. It's my opinion.
No, I think you're right. I would just think that most of the people directly involved would be dead by now, right? I mean, what are you? I guess they just don't want everybody to know.
It's still, these are government documents now. So it's going to tell the American people, oh yeah, by the way, our government's been lying to us for 60 years. Well, what else are they lying to us about? Now you talk to your average American today and you say, do you think the government lies to you? They'll say yes. But depending on who you talk, well, it's only those evil Republicans, or it's only those damn Democrats. They'll say stuff like that. And I think they're all dirty. That's just my opinion. They're all pieces of human debris who need to be flushed down the toilet of life. Some French wine right now, so it's going to get real fun today. We're going to have a good time, you guys.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Sounds good to us. We got some crumble over here, so.
Woo!
You mentioned Oswald. I don't think any of us think that he was actually the trigger man or the lone trigger man. Who do you think were the most likely cast of characters when it comes to the actual trigger man?
Okay, well, there's an interesting book that came out. I have it here in front of me. Let me open up, see when it was printed. First printing May 2001 by a guy named Robert Galen Ross Sr. And it's called, the name of the book is called The Elite Serial Killers of Lincoln, JFK, RFK, and MLK. And on page 103, he lists a cast of characters, including Cliff Carter, Carlos Marcello, Jack Ruby, George Reese, John Ernst, Clyde Faust, and Jack Grimm. He lists that. Now, these same people also come up in a memoir written by an ex-mafia associate who I know personally, named Roderick McKenzie. And he lists several people too, and it's almost the same list. So that to me tells me that this is a lot of not just smoke, but there's some flames here too. Now, does that mean everybody who was listed here was involved or was a shooter? I don't know. But I tend to agree that there were multiple teams in multiple areas. It wasn't just one or two guys with a rifle. You have a spotter. You have probably someone on a communication device. Probably have somebody who's maybe watching your back if you're in a building or something. You have a team placed somewhere. And that's where people get a little screwed up. They think, well, you put a sniper here and there. And no, these are sniper teams. I can go through what Mackenzie said, because I think it's a more detailed list if you guys are interested in hearing it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I go through this list on my second Kennedy presentation called The Killers, where I name a lot of names. Here's what Mackenzie said, and he got this from Malcolm Wallace. He claims, a few days after the assassination, Mackenzie used to go to this place called Circus Bar. I think that was the name of it, owned by a local gangster named Jake Miranda. This was in Dallas. And he said Malcolm Wallace was in there one night, and he was drunk, and he was talking loud. And the guy came over, and he goes, look, you know Wallace. Why don't you get him out of here? You know, take him someplace. Get him out of this place. And Mackenzie said he needed that like he needed a third testicle. But he said he did what he was told, and they hopped in Wallace's pickup truck, and he said that had enough booze in it to take care of the 56th Infantry Division. And they ended up driving to Fort Worth, where they checked into a hotel run by these two Mexican ladies, and they started partying and having sex with the girls. And after they were done with them, he said Wallace got super drunk and started reading off this list of people to him, which I'm going to read you now. He said, in the command area on the second floor of the school book building was Cliff Carter, who was Lyndon Johnson's personal lawyer, Carlos Marcello, who was the mob boss of Louisiana, Jack Ruby, and George Reese. Now, I'd never heard of George Reese before, but apparently he was a torpedo for the local mob there in Dallas. In the alley behind the fence and above the so-called grassy knoll, Clyde Faust, John Ernst, Jack Grimm, and Joseph P. Dugan. And we're going to get to Dugan here in a minute. He's a real colorful guy. Under the bridge, in case President was not shot, and above the RR area, the railroad area, was Charles Harrelson, Chauncey Holt, Charles Frederick Rogers, and a man called Dimitri from the American Council of Christian Churches. On the roof of the county records building was Harry Weatherford, Roger Craig, Richard Scalzetti, and Michael Victor Mertz, who was one of those Corsican hitmen mentioned in other places, and that was his nom de plume. On the sixth floor of the Texas Book Building was Ruth Ann Martinez, sometimes known as Hope or Esperanza Martinez. He said Lee Harvey Oswald was there, but under a spell. That's what Malcolm said. Malcolm Wallace places himself there, and he said there was another guy named Lloyd Factor who was there, an American Indian. And he said the Dow Tex building, the team was composed to be on the top, but had some problems, so they were out of a window. And that was Eugene Hale Brading, Frank Sturgis, Rafael Chichi Quintero, and Richard Kane. Now, Richard Kane is mentioned twice because his real name was Scalzetti, and he's mentioned on the roof of the county records building. So by that time, Wallace is either A, handing out disinformation, or he's so drunk that he's forgetting things. And that's the list that I got from Mackenzie, who said he got it from Malcolm Wallace.
Wow, and you said that's almost identical to another list.
Yes, and that's the one in the Galen Ross book. And I asked Mackenzie one time, I said, you ever heard of Galen Ross? He's like, I don't know who that guy is. And he'd never heard of him. And Galen Ross said he got that information from, quote, a mobster, and he would not name him. These guys are telling stories, and it sounds like they're telling the same story.
You said that these names were also tied to the MLK assassination, yes?
Well, some of them are.
Gotcha.
I believe that Martin Luther King was killed, again, by some of the same, how can I say, industries. And so was Bobby Kennedy, that killed Bobby's brother.
Many of the Kennedys have gotten taken out, and it seems obvious that it was deliberate. And something I'm not sure if you knew that I was talking to Mike about before. Did you know that the last name Kennedy in Gaelic actually means grim-headed or ugly-headed or like helmet-headed? So it's almost like poetic, if you will, that it was like planned out that Kennedy was supposedly going to have his head blown out on live TV. The grim-headed president, ugly-headed president. Just kind of a crazy coincidence there. Wild,
I
right?
did not know that. Yeah, that's wild.
Right? I didn't know that either. It wasn't actually on live TV, right? It was Dick Gregory brought the footage to Geraldo, like, was it 11 or 13 years later for the Zapruder?
It was, I think, when I was 13 or 14, so this was in 78 or 79, because I remember watching it on TV.
Okay.
And, I think it was Dick Gregory who drug it up.
Yep.
Because it was never shown on television before.
No, not until he played on Geraldo. You could hear the audible gasps throughout the audience, and it was crazy. Yeah. You watched it live. That's nuts.
I believe that has been heavily doctored.
Really?
Yes, extremely heavily doctored.
How so?
To the point where you can't trust anything in it. Well, for starters, we're told Abraham Zapruder took it. By the way, Abraham Zapruder was a good friend of George de Mohrenschildt. So he was good friends with him. De Mohrenschildt was also supposed to be one of Oswald's buddies. Supposedly, Zapruder took that picture from that pedestal, took that camera footage, but he was afraid of heights. He had vertigo.
Yeah.
And his chances on that pedestal are about 1,000,000 to 1. Also, that camera, as we see the car is coming from a different direction, and then there's an instant snap cut, and then the car is coming down the street. Okay, so we know it's been doctored because that's a cut. That's not turning off the camera and starting it back up again. The background has been blown up. When the car drives by, almost very, very few people are even looking at the car. Kennedy's head being blown, pieces being blown off, that's been painted in. The video does not match still photographs taken from the time. There's videos that people have done on the Zapruder film showing that it is a heavily doctored, if not a complete fabrication.
You know, that's so interesting because you're not the first person I've heard that from. And you mentioned Zapruder and how he had vertigo. I was listening to another person, and they mentioned the same thing, that Zapruder had vertigo, and that would be unlikely for him to be up there. But not only that, that his secretary was there because he had vertigo, and she was supposed to be holding him. However, she wasn't even touching him. And also, if you're able to look at other people's photographs at the moment when the gunshot went off, at the angle that you could see Zapruder, he didn't even flinch when the gunshot went off, almost like he knew it was supposed to happen.
Or the gunshot took place at a different time. There's so much weirdness going on, it's hard to tell what's going on. I know it sounds weird saying that, but that's kind of what I think. By the way, if you go frame by frame and blow up the Zapruder film, there's all sorts of crazy, weird stuff involved in it. There's weird shadows that are running across the screen. You can see that the people are not looking at the vehicle. Also, that Beverly Oliver had taken a movie camera and filmed it too, and the FBI comes and confiscates it. And it's that footage and that camera has never been seen to this day. Well, not by the American people. So I would like to know where that footage is. Do you guys remember the comedian Bill Hicks?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Bill Hicks used to say You know, when they get a new president, they take him into a room and the screen comes down and a view of the Kennedy assassination that no one's ever seen before is shown to them. And after that, the screen goes up and a voiceover loudspeaker goes, any questions?
Man.
Well, who knows? That's probably Beverly Oliver's film, you know?
Probably.
So I've heard before people who've analyzed the film and are like experts on whether a film has been edited or whatnot that have said that they think it's completely fake, and the fact that it came out so long after the fact that it was meant to just either cover a trail and make people think a different narrative, as well as just throw up a lot of confusion and kind of like stir the conspiracies off trail. So now we're talking about like, oh, well, was this the case, that the case, instead of digging like, yo, they killed the president and they're lying to us, and now we're debating maybe things that don't matter as much. Have you heard of like some wild stuff? Like they say there's like a dog man in the footage of the film somewhere, and that the babushka lady was a Rothschild and stuff like that. Anything to that?
There's all sorts of crazy stuff. Yeah. Also, there was supposedly a film lab that this thing was doctored at on the East Coast. And if you remember right, let's see, some Hollywood big shot has bought this place. There used to be a top secret film outfit in Laurel Canyon. I think it was called Lookout Mountain, and it was supposed to be an Air Force place that had everything: sound, color, animation, miniatures, and that a lot of Hollywood stars had top secret access to, including Jimmy Stewart, and some people say Marilyn Monroe. And when I talked to Mackenzie one time, he said that he knew a guy who was involved in TV production and stuff. His name is Delbert Graham. He was involved in some circus movies, a couple of the Lassie television shows, things like that. And he said he went to Lookout Mountain one time with them, and they got in and wandered around in it. Now, is he telling me a tall tale? I don't know, but that's what he said. So when it comes to faking movie footage and doctoring things, the U.S. government had the capability and the time and the money, because they have endless resources, to do any of this stuff. And I believe that almost every single photograph from the Kennedy assassination has had some degree of doctoring in it as well.
Meaning like the autopsy photos and whatnot?
Well, obviously them, but also photographs that we could see, let's say online. If you Google or whatever, Kennedy assassination photos from this, I think that there's a lot of these photos that have been doctored.
Oh, yeah, like the stage sniper nest that Oswald supposedly shot from.
Mm-hmm. And I like what Bill Hicks said about that. He goes, I went there to the 6th floor, and it was real accurate because Oswald wasn't in it.
Hicks was a legend.
I miss him so much.
Yeah, he was so great. To me, him and Carlin, probably my two all-time favorites, and they're both gone, so...
Yeah.
I digress.
Sam Kinnison's gone, too. He was my favorite.
One thing I did want to ask you, I figure this is a good time. In your presentation, you mentioned this one thing real flippantly, and never again, and I caught it, and I was like, I want to ask him about that. You mentioned, I think it was the photograph of Lyndon Johnson being sworn in right after the incident, and I believe you said something to this extent. You said, this is a photograph of Lyndon Johnson getting sworn in, and oh, by the way, not all presidents have been. I wanted to know what you meant by that.
It wasn't necessary for him to be... by the way, he had that swearing ceremony document in his pocket. Wow. You don't have to be sworn in, apparently, if you're a vice president and the president dies. It's not necessary.
Okay.
So why did he do it? And I believe that they did it because it takes up time in order to switch the coffins. That's what I think he did it for.
I've heard one of the first things that he did, too, was call Kennedy's brother to tell him to just be like, oh, I have to take the oath of office, as if for no other reason than to rub it in.
Yeah, I think he did that, too, because Lyndon Johnson, again, was a psychopath, and one of the things he liked to do was take a dump in front of his staff members as they're dictating and writing down his scheduling and stuff, just because he liked to embarrass people. And just rub it in. I mean, just literally, let's not get filthy here, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, there's people out there that love to make other people feel uncomfortable.
Yes. It makes you wonder, though, like, how does someone like that literally reach the highest office in the world, in the known world?
Because he lied, stole, and murdered his way to the top. That's why.
Yeah.
And Lyndon Johnson, he was not a stupid man, okay? He was reckless and he was crazy, but he wasn't dumb. And he was able to connive and weasel his way and take bribes to amass a fortune to pay people off and to get where he was.
And if we come from the understanding that most, if not all of the politicians, especially presidents, come from or at least propped up by the same secret societies and cults and stuff, someone with his traits would be exactly what they're looking for to play their game.
Yeah. I mean, they got their star player here with this guy.
And if I'm not mistaken, too, one of Kennedy's last speeches, wasn't he directly addressing secret societies and saying how that's so un-American and whatnot?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, they were abhorrent.
Know that there's probably Freemason stuff involved. There's probably, and George Bush was there, and he's frickin' skull and bones.
And doesn't he say that he doesn't know where he was that day?
Yeah, that's what he claimed for years, and then he changed his mind and went, "Oh yeah, I remember where I was. I was making a phone call." He's talking about being at a hotel or something like that. I don't know, but he's photographed right there in front of that book building. Junior was there too. He's wandering out of Daly Plaza when he was 17 years old. He's photographed. Both of them are.
Who was the second guy you cut out?
George Bush Jr.
Junior and senior. Wow.
They were both there. And by the way, they're both skull and bones. And George Bush Sr. was CIA. And by the way, I think he was probably the biggest drug dealer in the history of this country. I think the Bushes are sitting on probably about $1 trillion worth of dope money.
Oh, yeah.
That's my opinion.
And probably just as many bodies, just about, too.
Oh, probably.
And
I mean, that's what I believe a great deal of the Vietnam War was over, was that golden triangle of dope.
I don't know how it fits in there, but it seems like it's worth noting with the secret society and stuff. I think Kennedy's the only Catholic president ever, and that could have some ties with, the Jesuits or the Vatican or even the mob, and how that plays in, I'm not sure, but just seems like it's worth connecting.
Yeah, well, the retarded Mutzadel, who's in the White House right now, claims he's Catholic, but yeah, he's about as Catholic as I am. But he's
something.
But Kennedy was an open Catholic, yes, and the first one, I do believe, yeah.
That's so crazy. I didn't know that either. Wow, that's nuts. I never even realized that he was the first. Has there been more openly Catholic presidents since him, or is he still the only one?
I think so. I don't think.
Wow.
I think, well, except for the retard right now who says he's Catholic.
Right, yeah, well.
And obviously that opens up its own.
Time he went to Mass. 19, what? I just...
The only thing he has in common is he likes the little kids,
Oh, yeah. When he's not sniffing kids, he's shaking hands with people that aren't there.
Well, that could fit into the whole Catholic conspiracy that could be opened up on its own as well.
Yeah,
I know.
Brian, have you ever taken like an interest or a deep dive into anything else, like Bigfoot, moon landing, anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah. And UFO stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of a little outfit here in the Northwest called UFO I-Team, and we were trying to get a TV reality show put together about an investigative crew of people, and I was the forensic sketch artist, because I'm an artist. People would describe to me different crafts and creatures and things, and I would draw them in front of them, and that was my job. And we filmed a couple pilot episodes, and it was never picked up, and nobody ever bought the show. So we filmed it up here in Granite Falls, not Granite Falls, but Glacier, Washington.
It sounds like a show I'd watch. Sounds
Absolutely.
awesome.
What was your favorite thing that you ended up drawing?
I drew like a pyramid craft, and I did a painting of it too. A biker guy up there. Let's call him Jimmy. So Jimmy sat down with him, and he described this thing, and I drew it, and then I painted it, and I gave him the original painting. And in the TV show that we filmed of it, Jimmy was portrayed by his friend, because he didn't want to go on camera. And but I'm in contact with him to this day. texted and call each other every once in a while. He's a really cool guy. Real interesting. He's got a cool Bigfoot story, too.
A Bigfoot story? I definitely want to hear that. What did the craft look? The triangle craft, was it black? Did it have three?
It have a three-sided pyramid, okay, Mike, you said you play D&D, so you know what a four-sided dice?
Oh yeah, so this is the one that looks like a pyramid.
It looked like a four-sided dice, and it was spinning, and then it hovered above a river, and these three pipes went down, and it looked like they were siphoning off water off this river. And he watched it, and then the pipes went back up, and it spun away. And he said about a minute or so later, these F-16s or something, or F-18s, flew chasing it. And he had some friends who had a mink farm down the road, and he went out there and knocked on their door and said, "Did you see this thing?" I can't remember if his buddy saw it or not, but anyway, that was the story about the craft.
Do you remember how large he said it was?
No, he doesn't know how big it was, but he remembers seeing it very clear.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And where did this happen?
This happened in Glacier, Washington, which is, if you go up north to Bellingham and hang a right and drive until you get to a ski resort, that's where it took place at.
Wow. Is that whereabouts his Bigfoot experience took place too?
Yeah, that's where it took place. There's a big mushroom hunting community in that area. And so when mushrooms come out during the fall, everyone goes out mushroom hunting. So him and his girlfriend were going out mushroom hunting. And there was this big, huge log kind of up on the side of the road thing. And he goes out there and he's picking these mushrooms. And he looks over the corner of his shoulder and he says this big, huge creature just walked right across the road, right in front of his car where his girlfriend's in it. Okay, so he goes back and he goes, "Hey, honey, did you?" She did not see it.
Wow.
Now, Jimmy is from upstate New York. That's where he's originally from. And him and his relatives used to go hunting all the time. And he said, "Brian, I can track anything." He said there was not a leaf or a blade of grass that had a mark or was pressed into the ground or anything. He goes, "But I swear this thing walked right across the road, and it was about 7 or 8 feet tall, and it was black, and it wasn't a bear."
That's insane.
And there's lots of instances of Bigfoot that have supernatural abilities, like they disappear in front of you, or they walk through something and don't leave a trace. So there's a supernatural element to Bigfoot, I believe. That's my opinion.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that for sure. To tie this kind of back to the JFK, I've heard people say that he had an interest in UFOs and maybe he was going to, brief the public or try and inform the public about UFOs, and that's kind of why they silenced him too. Do you know anything about that?
Yes. In fact, he told that to Marilyn Monroe.
She had to go because she knew too much too.
You know what happened to her too. I don't think she took those pills. I think she was murdered.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, isn't there something real fishy with the way she was found, like her body?
Oh, all sorts of fishy stuff. Not to mention Bobby Kennedy and Peter Lawford and another guy were seen speeding away from her house at 90 miles an hour. They got pulled over by the police. Well, the police is not going to give the Attorney General and Peter Lawford, one of the Rat Packers, a speeding ticket because they're American royalty. So they let them go. So we know that they were there on the night she died. I believe they were there the night she died. Let's put it that way. Sam Giancana also took credit for killing her. Whether that's true or not, or he's just saying it to brag or something, I don't know. But that's what his nephew said.
It's a crazy world, huh?
It's a super crazy world. By the way, Sam Giancana knew Marilyn Monroe before she was even famous.
Really? Was she involved in the underworld?
No, he just, Giancana, Chicago had a lot of ties to Hollywood at the time. Johnny Rosselli went down there and got a bunch of the union people under mob control through various means. And when Marilyn Monroe was coming up, Giancana knew who she was. He had a lot of disdain for Hollywood people, but they still controlled it. If there was a movie being made, the mob could have it shut down in less than 24 hours if they didn't want it being made or something was going on. He'd make a phone call to 1 or 2 union reps, and that's it.
Wow,
That's how much power that Chicago had over Hollywood at that time. Obviously, they don't anymore.
And Vegas.
And Vegas, too. That's right.
Like they say in Casino, it's a totally totally different place now.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned earlier, and I know that if I don't have you elaborate on it a little bit more, there's going to be someone that comments. You mentioned Harrelson, and of course,
Yeah.
people probably know his son, Woody Harrelson. Could you explain that a little further?
Yeah, Charles Harrelson was a known criminal. He had been a heroin trafficker for a short time. My buddy Rod said that he knew him and said Harrelson was always kind of a happy-go-lucky guy. He said he was a killer, but he was happy. And he said he was usually high a lot. And he nicknamed him Frankenstein Head. He said because he had a big Frankenstein head. And that was his nickname. Well, that he named him. He didn't know if anyone else called him Frankenstein Head, but he did. And he believes that he was one of those three tramps. And Harrelson was convicted of murdering a judge. And he, at one time, said that when he was arrested, he was coked up out of his mind, as usual, screaming at the police held up in a building saying that, he was in Dallas and he knows who shot the president. And then, of course, he was interviewed by a British television company and he denies any of it. But when he saw the pictures of the three tramps and the guy says, well, is this you? He goes, no, but it looks just like me.
Another coincidence.
Yeah. Here's my personal opinion on Woody Harrelson. I personally like the guy. I think he's extremely intelligent. He's well-spoken. He's not one of these Hollywood dunskies, like a lot of them are. A lot of these guys, I'm surprised they made it out of the fourth grade, But Harrelson is not. And I'd like to sit down with him and have a couple drinks and talk to him sometime. Because I think he knows quite a bit about his dad.
He's got to, right? I mean, he was involved at some level in his father's life, or his father was involved in his life to some degree, right?
Yeah, I don't know how much. I really don't know how much. And Rod said that Harrelson and Charles Frederick Rogers were a murder duo team that traveled around the United States killing people on contract assassinations. And he said they went overseas on more than one occasion. Now, I don't know if that one is true, but I suspect that they were a murder duo team. And Rogers is there. He's one of the three tramps, too.
Now, we can only imagine that part of Woody Harrelson's success in Hollywood comes from his connect with his dad and all the friends and connections he made by doing some dirty work favors for people.
Yeah. But Woody Harrelson is very talented also. And when he was a kid, he's a good-looking kid. When he was on Cheers.
Great show.
Great show. Yeah, it's an excellent show. And so I think that Woody probably got there under his own talent, I suspect, because he's an extremely talented actor. I really like Woody Harrelson a lot.
Natural Born Killers.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies, although it's very difficult to watch it, but it's a brilliant movie. And Oliver Stone made that one from a Quentin Tarantino script.
Yes, he did. Yeah, and he tries to tie his characters all together too. I know he mentions like the PO in Natural Born Killers is like the same PO in Reservoir Dogs. That I don't know, just kind of cool how he ties that all together.
Yeah, Scagnetti, I think.
Scagnetti, yeah, that's it. Scagnetti's an asshole.
Yeah, he's a prick. Yeah.
That's great. Oh man, yeah. Well, you mentioned that I am a D&D fan. I've been playing since Jesus Christ, since I was in 7th grade. I'm 43.
Wow.
So I started at AD&D 2nd Edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. When did you start playing?
I started playing in 1981.
Wow, got me smoked.
I played with my buddy Chad and Vic and a couple kids that lived on our street, in high school. And then I was born in a pretty religious home, and so after a while my parents were like, hey, this D&D stuff, everyone in the church is saying it's bad, so you have to quit playing it. Mm. So I had to quit playing it in high school, and then when I moved here to go to art school, I started playing it again. And I play with some of my art students and stuff to this day. And again, my buddy Ben Thompson and I are writing D&D modules. The third one is being produced as we speak. It's at the graphic designer's place. He's putting it together. But the other two are published. You can get them online for $1 each. And it's called 99-Cent Adventures. And you can look it up on Kickstarter, which will give you a link, and you can pick them up for $1 a pop.
That is dirt cheap, may I say. You said for an adventure module, that's dirt cheap.
We also sell actual adventures, but you can only, I mean, printed books, but you can only get them from Ben and I when we go to a comic book show, because we don't want to be shipping crap all over the United States. That may change someday, but that's our market, is PDFs.
Well, man, I appreciate you doing this. I really don't think there's anybody that can just regurgitate, and I mean that in a complimentary way, as much information off the top of their head about this subject as you. I really believe that. I mean, it's super impressive, and I've always found the JFK thing super. Man, when I go down the rabbit hole, I just go, and I just go. And
interesting, and you use a term that I've heard a lot, and I'm going to respectfully disagree with this term, and that term is rabbit hole. And here's what I think people should think about the Kennedy assassination. It's not a rabbit hole, it's a spider web. And I'm going to explain how this works. You take the assassination, that's the center of the web. And you have strings going out in, 100, 200 different directions, right? But they're all tied together with that spiral that goes around and around the web. And if you think of the Kennedy assassination and that, it's going to make a lot more sense to you.
You're right.
I hope that paints a picture.
No, I like that a lot. And what I was going to say is I think this is one of the best topics, too, to get people's eyes open and start going down these trails, because it's one of the most obvious and apparent ones. Like, how much bigger does it get than publicly killing the president and all the different angles, like you said, on the web and trails that it can lead to follow? There's obviously something fishy. And if you were to sum up one of the main fishy points of it, what would you try to dial in on for somebody who's a skeptic?
Let's see. One, it was wrapped up so neatly. I mean, they catch Oswald within less than 2 hours. They already have him identified, even though the cops don't even know who he is. And then they kill him off on Sunday morning. Wrapped up package, he did it, bada bing, bada boop, bada beep, that's the end. One, that's a little too neat. And two, I have a lot of friends and coworkers and stuff that will come up to me and they'll watch one of these Oswald Did It shows that come out, like propaganda almost every year, usually in November, of course. And it'll say something like the latest computer evidence that shows that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman, blah, blah. And they'll come up to me after watching one of these shows and like, well, I'm pretty convinced Oswald did it. What do you think? And I said, well, real killers use real bullets, and real bullets do real damage, so let's count the bullets. And I got up to 11 shots. And that's when their face starts to change color, and they either slink off, or they change the subject, or they get indignant and say, well, bullets can do multiple damages. I'm like, sure, let's say the one that went through the windshield of the car is the one that hit Kennedy in the throat. That's still 10, Yeah. I'll count them down, and I'm still left with about 8 or 9 shots, and then they just sit there with their mouth hanging open, like guppies at feeding time, and then they just change the subject and they just walk away. I mean, that's happened to me about maybe 5, 6, 7 times.
Yep, that cognitive dissonance kicks in, and they take in the narrative that they were fed on the TV program.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that they didn't release the video for so long, so then everyone was just left to buy the narrative, like you said, that they are probably already had pre-packaged narrative, just, this is what happened, this is who did it, we got him, we killed him, nothing to see here.
Yeah, exactly. And as much as I like the movie JFK, it has a lot of flaws in it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to worship that movie. But that's a good way to start, too, because it shows a lot of inconsistencies with the official story. They change some names. They have a couple made-up characters, which I don't like. Things like that, which I don't think makes Oliver Stone look very good. But the movie still says, hey, look at all these weird inconsistencies that just can't be explained any other way than the fact that it didn't happen like the government says it happened. And that's when Jim Garrison was going through that stuff. The movie kind of, focuses on him, the Kevin, what's his face, his character, Jim Garrison.
Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner, that's right, who did an excellent job on that, by the way. That's my favorite movie that he's in, and I'm not a Kevin Costner fan at all. But he did an excellent job in that movie. And Jim Garrison actually plays himself as a judge in the movie. Not himself, but he plays the judge character, Earl Warren.
I didn't know
in
that.
the movie. You guys know that, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I like when they do that, when they do little cameos like that.
Yeah.
It really is one of the more easily digestible, quote unquote, conspiracies to get into for the average person. Because obviously, like we've been saying almost this whole podcast, the video, boom, it's right there. Even if it isn't real, they still blew his head off. This one I think opens more people's eyes than any other ones. It's a good gateway.
Here's something else I thought was really interesting about that JFK movie. Remember at the very beginning when they said the president's been shot and he goes into that bar and they turn the TV on and this one guy stands up and he goes, "Great, they got that bastard."
Yeah.
Remember that part?
Yeah.
Well, that's the real guy that Kevin Bacon's character played. The gay dude.
Really?
That's him. That's him for real.
Wow.
Yeah. I can't remember his character's name. Perry something or Perry Russo. I think that was his name. Wow. Yeah, that's the real Perry Russo right there.
Well, Brian, I would love to have you back.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
I had a great time, you guys.
Well, I appreciate chatting with you. Awesome episode.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you're the best, man, when it comes to this stuff. And yeah, we'll definitely have you back. And next time we'll get into all different things. We'll just see wherever it takes us.
That sounds like an excellent idea. I love it. Thank you guys so much.
That was Brian Snoddy and his spiderweb and his JFK spiderweb.
We talked banging Marilyn Monroe, talked the CIA, talked the conspiracy of secret societies, what a piece of shit Lyndon B. Johnson was, trail off with some fucking cryptid talk, and yeah, made for a great episode.
Yeah, I'm excited that he's into all that. I didn't know. I kind of figured he might have taken some deep dives into some other things, and we were right. So that's going to be fun. I look forward to speaking to him again later on down the road. Also, he's a Dungeons & Dragons player, which is pretty badass. So if anybody listening is a Dungeons & Dragons player, you should definitely check out his adventures. They're 99 cents. I mean, seriously. I'll be checking them out for sure. As I said, I do play still.
Speaking for you and I, there's no shortage of nerd stuff here, and there seems to be a lot of crossover between nerds of all types and seeking the truth. So that type of content and guest is always going to be welcome here.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know he was a super awesome artist. That's kind of cool, man.
Yeah, that's that show that he was talking about. That would be fucking badass. I kind of want to try and talk to him or somehow convince him to get that going again, or get a hold of some of that footage if it's out there and just like release it on YouTube. That sounds sick.
Funny you say that, dude, because I was thinking along those same lines, like, I didn't ask, or I don't think he said when he tried to do that pilot show, because nowadays it's so like you can do it yourself, like you said, for a very, very small budget, if not for free, put it on YouTube, get some traction that way. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe next time we talk to him, we could kind of see where he's at with that, if he owns the footage or whatnot, because, dude, I mean, that's a super cool idea. And I was asking him details about the Triangle Craft, because, Tom, I'm not sure if you know or not. Have you ever heard of the TR-3B Black Manta?
Is that the craft that they declassified? The government admitting that certain UFO sightings was just a top secret craft and it was like a black triangle?
Well, they've never admitted it. But yes, it's the black triangle, and it's got 3 little lights on each triangle apex, and then it's got a bigger, brighter light. Yep. That's the TR-3B Black Manta. It has been heavily rumored since the early 90s. They pretty much, like you said, they've all but came out and spoken those words that, yeah, it's out there. But I think that's responsible for a lot of sightings. Not all of them, obviously, but I think that's responsible for all of them.
Oh, yeah. One of the most famous ones around here, if you heard of it or anyone out there. Yep, the Tinley Park lights. Like, I can't remember exactly when it was. Probably
I could tell you
2008 or some shit.
I could tell you the day. I can't tell you the year. And the reason why I know the day is because it's my wife's birthday. So it happened on March 13th.
Oh,
and
shit.
I don't know the year, but that's what day. Yeah, the huge Tinley Park sighting. It's been on TV shows and everything.
Oh,
bro.
yeah. I know I was in middle school, and, like, I was even into that type of stuff when I was a kid, and I didn't see it, but I remember a bunch of people talking about seeing it, and I was pissed that I missed it, and I couldn't believe it. But, yeah, I seen it on some random UFO documentaries and whatnot, and that's exactly what it was a large triangular craft that was sighted a bunch in Tinley Park, Illinois.
We got some things planned for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. Any closing thoughts, bud?
Nope, that's it. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on social medias, and, yeah, be ready for the next one. We're going to have another base level conspiracy, if you will, when our next episode is going to be on the moon landing, which is another kind of low-hanging fruit topic that's easy to tear apart. So I think that'll be an enjoyable one as well.
So, yeah, like Tom said, follow us on Instagram or X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Two Truth Seekers. We're on all the streaming platforms, including YouTube. You could check us out, literally all of them, Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, whatever. We're all out there. And if you want to support the show, this is something that Tom doesn't even know yet because I forgot to tell him. We just set up a Patreon for the show.
Let's go.
So if you want to follow the show, we haven't really set up any tiers or any bonus content yet. That's still all in the works. But if you guys just want to help the show financially just because you think we're amazing dudes, then you can do that on Patreon at Conspiracy and Chill Podcast. That's all. Till next time.
The greatest prison that people live in is the fear of what other people think. What happened to me as a result of all the ridicule I went through is that I stepped out of the fear of what other people thought.